Hi there, this is John Drew here from Elevated Planet.
Angela Gabrielle here from Elevated Planet. And boy, do we have a good show in store for you. Well, I'm really excited, and I think John is as well, and he will tell us a little bit more about
I'm struggling to contain myself, Jolie. That's how excited I am.
it.
Yeah. So no, this is going to be really exciting. Now, one first note to add at the start of the show is that next week we are not going to be live on YouTube. We are going to be live on Zoom, and we will send Zoom links to all who are interested. So if you are already on our distribution list, you will automatically be getting invitations. So nothing to worry about there. If you wish to be part of it, then just drop me an email to johndrew@elevatedplanet.life, and we will make sure that you are on our list for all invitations and also that you get the newsletters as well. So yeah, now also just to mention as well, because obviously Zen Cleanse is something that we've spoken about in recent weeks, and I've just been come out the other side of that during this last week, and it is an amazing experience, and it is something that I will recommend absolutely. But the one thing I would say is that I need to just have a little bit of time to explain that. So what I'll do is I'll reserve it till the end of the program, and if there's time, I'll go into a little bit more detail about what really it entails and what I would think about it. And I can put more details on the newsletter as well. But it is an incredible experience. I would recommend it. But again, it would be good to just have the opportunity to take a step back and give myself a little 2 or 3 minutes just to explain what this is all about. And I also want to get Viola Rose back on the program as well from over in Sedona to give her piece on this as well, because she is a resident expert with the Zen Cleanse product. And, you know, it's well worth exploring should you feel so inclined. Anyway, so this week we are going back to astrology. We are going back to Pam Gregory. We've featured her several times on the show during our existence, and you know, have a deep level of respect for Pamela and her work. She's a great communicator. She's very wise. She's very humble. I love what she does. I love how she puts this information across. And the reason I really love this as it is coming together now is that, as we've spoken about in recent weeks, when we had Jim Self on the program, when we had you know, others over recent weeks, you know, whether it's Greg when we were covering the one field, Greg Braden, Lynn McTaggart, and all the rest, you know, all we're really now pointing to the end of this year as the start of something big. Okay, something that you couldn't just say, you know, this is something that is inescapable. Everybody will know there's something big happening. And I think that this is one of the joys, is that Pam puts this across so well, and it's backed up by the astrological signs. Now, if I wind the clock back 6.5 years, I didn't believe in astrology at all. Mind you, I say that, I do remember a time back in the 1980s when I had a friend who really got into astrology and actually pulled a chart together. And at the time, you know, I had a look at it as a bit of mild interest, but I was astounded. I've got to say, I was astounded by the level of accuracy that came back. And it was a very detailed chart. It was a proper chart. And you kind of like, you're blown away and you think, wow, how can this be? How can the alignment of stars and everything amongst your, you know, across versus your time of birth, your date of birth, how can that really map out who you are? But it absolutely seemed to. And anybody who saw that chart said, yeah, that's you, John, you know? I just couldn't believe it. Anyway, so, but then I kind of shelved it and just got back into my logical left brain, and completely ignored anything that didn't make quite, you know, logical sense from a left brain perspective. But in recent times, I've obviously realized that the wisdom of the ancient Egyptians, the Essenes, and all these other masterful races that have been out there, the Mayans, you know, there's so many races out there who understand the astrological implications for things during the cycles of life. And this is where, you know, it comes back to this old ancient prophecies, and everything is pointing to now. We've spoken at length about the war scroll over the last few weeks, the sons of light versus the sons of darkness in one final last battle. And that is basically what we are coming into now. It is the light versus the dark. But this is not a bad thing. This is a great thing because this is taking us into the new age of Aquarius, the age of the golden race. This is where from where we will end up with our world of unspeakable beauty. And this is worth working towards. But what you've got to do, as Pam Gregory will tell you, is get on your eagle's perch. Because once you see chaos playing out underneath you, you do not want to be drawn into the chaos. Because again, as Pam would tell you, once you get drawn into the chaos, you become quantumly entangled with the chaos, which means that you are giving your energy to the chaos. And you do not need to give your energy to the chaos. You can choose instead to give your energy to the light. And that is basically what will serve you and what will serve humanity, what will serve your community, what will serve the world around you is by you being a beacon of light for your community. So that is basically what we're advocating. And, Pam is going to lead the way and the charge on this for us going forward. And there's some interesting interesting ground to cover during this. Now, first thing to say is Pam recorded this 9 days ago. So this is slightly old news by, our standards, but at the same time, the ground she covers is really pointed to the second half of October, which we are not there yet, this being the 13th of October. So we're just approaching that now, but she also covers important ground over these previous few weeks as well, and explaining how, she had already provided insight into these things before they had happened as well. Not the easiest of things that have happened in recent weeks, but again, it's a really good resume, a really good, sorry, should I say, summary of what has happened. Now, one of the things I thought it worth pointing out is that Pam talks a lot about the anaretic degree, certain signs going into their anaretic degree, which is the 29th degree. And the way that is defined, and I need to explain this to you because I needed it explaining to me. So I thought rather than having, anybody who's not that astrologically aligned to just fumble around on that particular point, but it's an important point. Because if you think about it, astrology is about the 12 houses spread throughout 360 degrees. So each of those houses gets 30 degrees. Okay. So once it reaches the 29th degree, i.e. 29.01 up to 20 or 29.00 through to 29.99, that is the anaretic degree. That is when it is just about to leave that house and go into the next house. So that final degree of the sign is where it is about to go out of range, and it accentuates the energy, often showing its influence as the shadow side of the energies that are reflected within that sign. That is why the anaretic degree is important. So with that said, Jolie, is there anything you want to add before I hit the button and take us to point one?
Not at all. That was fascinating about the anaretic degree and how the shadow comes out as it's about to move into another house. So just for me, can you repeat what house we're moving out of and into and what it is again one more time? Is she gonna?
It's a variety of them because if you
Okay.
think about it, I mean, really, from our point of view, we're going out of, yeah. I mean, it's less about that, and what it's about is the totality of all the signs going on around the whole thing, the whole picture. If you looked at when Pam puts her charts out, which we're not going to go through that chart section, but everything is in relationship to each other,
Yeah.
right?
Interconnected, right?
It's
So
all
everything.
it's all interconnected. So rather than it just being, sort of like Pisces going into Aquarius kind of thing, it's way
Uh-huh.
more complicated than that because you've got all different houses in different angles to each other. And, again, Pam is the person. In fact, it's interesting because Pam provides 2 free videos from her YouTube channel that you can actually go into and learn all about this. I need to do that because
Yes. Both of us.
yeah, but that's the answer is that the anaretic degree, 29th degree, are about to go into the next sign, but it's each sign in relation to the other signs, everything in position to the planetary grid that's out there. So,
But what is so fascinating is how it affects Mother Earth,
right,
right?
right. This is it. This is it. And
Yeah.
again, this is one of the things that Pam always says at the start of her videos. It always comes up with this little box that says, "Surely you don't believe in astrology, do you?" Right? Because it's the one thing that obviously she's heard for many decades.
Yes.
And I understand that. I hear that from my friends, and I would have been the person saying it 6.5 years ago or even less.
But it just opens up so much more information to have for yourself and the world around you,
Yes, it
you know?
does. Yes, it does. I find it fascinating. And the fact that the ancient Egyptians and so many other historic, wonderful cultures that have taken us to where we are now understood this stuff. And we just been so taken up by technology and the likes, we think we have the answers. So,
Wow. We
yeah,
know nothing,
no.
really. I mean,
We're going to go back. We're going to ultimately, I think that to go forwards, we'll need to go backwards and realize that there was a lot more wisdom within the ancients that we have
I agree.
somehow railroaded our way out of, including
Mm,
with the indigenous cultures as well. There was a lot more wisdom that we felt that we needed to, that they were somehow the barbarians, and we needed to bring them up to date with how life should be. Whereas we're going
yeah.
to learn we should be more aligned with where they are, honoring the earth and honoring, our relationship to Gaia Mother Earth and the balance and the harmony with, the universe.
Amen. Hallelujah. And mazel tov to that.
Right. On that note, we are going to go to Pam, little section one for about 4.5 minutes. Bear with me a second. We'll be with it in a moment.
Hi everyone, I'm here to talk about the second half of October and the full supermoon that we have coming up in Aries, which is very powerful on the 17th of the month. However, before we get to that, I'm filming this on the 4th of October, and we have had some extraordinarily powerful days, both cosmically, energetically, astrologically, that I just want to recap on, because really has been enormous, I think, for many of us. Now, we expected around about the lunar eclipse on the 18th of September, particularly because it was in Pisces and conjunct Neptune, the ruler of Pisces. This has a lot to do with Neptune, Lord of the Seas. It's a lot to do with water, flooding, etc. There has been, very sadly, some massive flooding. I mean, right about the time of the eclipse, we had huge flooding in Central and Eastern Europe. Poland was actually, the entire country was declared a national emergency. But since then, we've also had extreme flooding in some parts of the US, with Hurricane Helene, I believe, the Carolinas, Tennessee. It's been really, really devastating. And also in Thailand, they've had extraordinarily unprecedented levels of flooding. So this is likely to continue, sadly, through certainly through 2025. And the reason for that is not only because that lunar eclipse in Pisces was very strong, conjunct Neptune, and we feel the effects of eclipses for several months after they are exact. But in addition to that, Neptune is coming up to that anaretic degree, that crisis degree, that 29th degree of Pisces through in fact, much of 2025. It is exact in March and October 2025, and also January 2026. After that, it starts to move on. But it's one of the major themes is linked to flooding. It's also linked to some other very beautiful things to do with our spirituality and shifting into becoming more ethereal beings, for sure. But flooding at one level is part of the picture. Transiting Neptune is also going to be conjunct the IC of the US chart for the 4th of July, 1776, 10 past 5 in the afternoon, Philadelphia. And this can mean over the next 2 years, 25 and 26, it can suggest more flooding. It can also, in a very different sense, suggest some kind of dissolution of the government in some way, the weakening of a central government, which would fit very much with the Aquarian energy and would very much fit with all I've been saying in the last 2-3 years about the Pluto return for the US, a whole spiritual transformation for the US. And I believe that it will result in quite a lot of decentralization in the US, whatever to the contrary you're seeing on the news, and that the US could even break up into 2 or 3 different sections, and certain states would run their own show, as it were. They wouldn't be beholden to central government. We will see what happens, but transiting Neptune on the base, the IC of that US chart opposing the midheaven, the government, the leadership, that centralized focus of government. I strongly feel this is about the dissolution, because it fits so much with Pluto moving into Aquarius. So sadly, I think we will continue to see some flooding. And remember that Gaia is going through her own upgrade, her own kind of upheavals. And of course, some of these extreme weather events are entirely natural, because of the high level of solar activity, which I'll go on to in a moment, but not all, as I'm sure you are aware.
Okay, that's the first little section. So yeah, and again, as Pam said there, you know, Gaia is going through its own upgrade. That's what we're going to be seeing a lot of. And Jim himself spoke to that a couple of weeks ago when we featured him on the show, talking about Gaia releasing the old energies that have been trapped under the surface, the wars, all the issues that there have been over centuries and thousands of years, all have to come to the surface to be released. And that's on a planetary level, and it's also on a personal level. You know, we will be finding, and I've heard instances from a number of people about, you know, emotions coming to the surface that they didn't even know that they were there. But this is what's happening for a lot of people. A lot of stuff is coming back to the surface, and it's not something that you need to repress. It's something that is there to be released. And that's what Gaia Mother Earth is doing, the same thing. Now, clearly this to do with the election and everything. This is why this is important to get this information out now, because the election is coming up in early November. We are getting mighty close. So, you know, within a few weeks, we will know how this all plays out. Or is this all deluded nonsense and the election passes off without a whisper? You know, somebody wins, somebody loses, and life goes on. If that's the case, then clearly this is missing the mark. But I know that when we, I think it was probably in January, we were having the same discussion then, and it was Pam who was actually talking about this at that particular point there. So this is not something new. She's been talking about this for literally the last 2 years. Now, this to me, I love this because this is a test on astrology. If nothing happens, then, you know, the naysayers actually are going to prove themselves to be correct one way or another. But there is a lot of things in the astrology right now. There are so many of these anaretic degrees coming to the surface, so many things where the influences and certainly the shadow influences will be coming to the surface. So it is a fascinating time to see how this all plays out. Jolie, anything you care to add?
I think you summed it up quite nicely. And so Pam is about to get into it more. So I'm excited to get to her.
Right. Yeah, we shall do that. And just to tell you on this section as well, we also include Stefan Burns, who is a geophysicist and is an amazing guy. And again, he has his own YouTube channel and he is well worth seeking out. He's, you know, he's great for us left-brainers because he's very scientific about what he does. Clearly very, very knowledgeable. But he's also very spiritual because, you know, he covers off the astrological side of things. He understands this new earth concept. And, you know, so he's bridging the gap for us left brainers and the right brainers. And so I would definitely, seek him out. And he adds a little bit. So basically, Pam goes into a particular point, which is to do with the Tongan earthquake that took place earlier this month. And so basically, Stefan's there just to kind of give some important points around that. And then I will expand on that a little bit further as well. So here we go. Bear with me.
The sun is throwing out a lot of information to us in the form of solar flares. So we are rapidly having to assimilate all this new information, this new energy, because however uncomfortable it may be at times with insomnia and chronic fatigue and tinnitus and aches and pains, nevertheless, this is providing fast track accelerated evolution for humanity. There is no doubt about that. So that level of solar flaring is likely to continue. And with that, and it does seem to be linked exact on the solar eclipse, we had a very large 6.8 earthquake, magnitude earthquake in Tonga. And that solar eclipse actually fell mostly across the sea. It crossed very few land masses. One of them was Easter Island. And isn't it interesting that Makemake, the dwarf planet, which is linked to the creator god of Easter Island, was exactly to the degree conjunct that solar eclipse. So because the eclipse path was falling right across Easter Island and a little bit of South America, but it was also falling exactly across Tonga.
Now in Google Earth, we can see how these 3 earthquakes are clustered together around Tofua Island. Interesting that the epicenter for that is directly on the island, even though the hypocenter is 106 kilometers down. If we go just slightly to the south, though, we will see the Hunga Ha'apai volcano, which exploded with a VEI-2 eruption on January 15th, 2022. This is the biggest volcanic eruption that we've had in recent history, and it was so strong that it actually altered the characteristics of the global electric circuit. And so that is why this is such a significant development, because last time we saw a big volcanic eruption along this subduction zone with the Hunga eruption, it changed the electromagnetic properties of the Earth temporarily for a few hours, and then there were long-term changes to the climate because of those volcanic clouds that went way up above the troposphere and into the stratosphere, making winters in Europe colder, winters in North America milder, and bringing overall more water and rain to North America, changing the climate across the world in many ways, though subtly. And those changes are still unraveling as we go through this decade. They're expected to kind of taper out and end around 2028, 2029.
Okay, so I just wanted to pause this here with gratitude to Stefan Burns. He's very, very good, and I definitely recommend his videos in terms of the scientific geological kind of side of things, but also spiritual as well, because he also understands the astrology side of things. Meanwhile, from a volcanic point of view, it's worth noting the impact of the change on the climate that 2022 volcanic eruption gave us across the world. And you know, they're saying that will peter out by 2029, the impact. So that's 7 years that the climate change impact has lasted from a volcano. And at the time of the eruption was heard halfway around the world. That's a pretty big volcanic eruption right there. Now, one of the key things I wanted to just quite quickly mention here is to do with this ring of fire. You know, so Jolie and I do what we refer to as CE5 meditations, where Jolie reaches out to other, let's say, otherworldly beings to ask for guidance, if we want to call it that, and any information that will help us. So some of this has proven to be remarkably accurate, with many things out there still as potential future possibilities. One thing that we repeatedly received was all about the activation within the ring of fire during the earth changes. So this really drew our attention to this earthquake in Tonga in such a volcanic region. So this one that took place in early October it's obviously in a place which can make a big difference. And again, as part of the Ring of Fire, part of the activation. Now, also another point of interest that I really wanted to focus on here is Ann Tucker, who's the lady who channels the angels. And I think we had Ann's work on the channel about 3 weeks ago, something like that. She was talking about the 3 days of darkness and the flash, which changes consciousness in an instant. Again, fascinating stuff. Definitely worth checking out on our show. Go back a few weeks and you'll see it there. So Ann Tucker was told by the angels to expect an earthquake event, a volcanic explosion that is so big that we hear it around the entire world. So to put that in context versus the January 2022 one, which could be heard halfway around the world, well, you assume it's kind of broadly twice the size of the volcanic eruption that took place then. And then again, you know, we think about the climate change that went with the 2022 one. So if there's one that's much bigger than that, then that is something that is going to last a lot longer as well. But here's the thing. Anne was told that the explosion would actually happen in the Indian Ocean. When we look at Tonga, that's in the Pacific. A vast majority of the Ring of Fire actually is in the Pacific. It's the Pacific Ring of Fire. So not surprising, really. But the Indian Ocean does come into the Ring of Fire around that Java Trench. The Java Trench is from where the 2004 eruption underwater earthquake took place that created the tsunami that did so much damage and so much loss of life back in Christmas of 2004. So it's a region that is known certainly to be very active. And that my thought around this was that if what Jolie received is correct, which is that there will be activation within the Ring of Fire, and if Ann Tucker's information is correct from the angels, and we tie those two together, then that kind of narrows it down to the Ring of Fire that would be around the Java Trench side of things. So just a point of interest. So I'll leave it at that for now, and we'll go back to Pam.
So we are likely to continue to see a lot more seismic activity and solar flare activity over the next couple of years. That is partly because the Earth's magnetic field has weakened to some degree, and that is allowing in more solar and cosmic information. And because everything is interconnected, that kind of destabilizes the ionosphere and connecting with the Earth's core, as it were, and that can create more seismic activity. And also, in addition to that, because Uranus, for a lot of 2025 and some of 2026, is it at its anaretic degree, 29 degrees of Taurus. Now, Uranus represents, is the planet most linked to earthquakes and seismic activity. Taurus represents fixed Earth, and that is a classic for more earthquake and volcanic activity. Uranus is also linked to high winds, storms, hurricanes, as Neptune's linked to flooding. Uranus is linked to the things I've just mentioned. And Uranus will be at that anaretic degree of Taurus exactly in June and July and October of 2025 and April of 2026. And so expect to see more extreme weather. It's all part of Gaia going through its kind of its heavings, as it, if you like, of labor pains to upgrade to the next level. So I do believe with all of this, and it's partly connected to the Homer symbolism, which is so strong right now, because Homer is in square to Pluto, and it's also in quincunx to Sedna. It's in very powerful geometry. Homer, the archetype for Homer, is very linked to birthing new land masses, because in her fire goddess aspect, she was said to birth the 8 islands of Hawaii. And so I do believe that more land masses will start to emerge from the seas. I believe that very strongly. We had that gigantic mountain range a few months ago emerging just off the coast of Chile. And only today, just a few minutes before I started to record this, I saw an article, which I'll link below, about areas of Antarctica starting to become green. Now, this is partly because of all the climate change, but the greening of lands which previously were seen to be non-fertile, and the land masses emerging from the sea in the coming couple of years, I believe they are the physical manifestation for New Earth, and they will provide great fertility for growing new food, very concentrated nutrition in the coming times. So, this isn't all bad news in any way. We are going to see new land masses representing New Earth with high levels of fertility and new foods. Very powerful day coming up on the 12th of October, and we will feel that a week to either side. This is the station of Pluto at 29 degrees of Capricorn, another anaretic degree. I mean, it's just extraordinary the way these outer planets are all coming to their final degrees of their sign. Now, from now on, Pluto has about 5 weeks to go in Capricorn until the 19th of November, when it moves into Aquarius for about 20 years. So this is the last gasp, the last 5 weeks in Capricorn in its 248-year cycle. And when a planet is at 29 degrees of its sign, it tends to express in a more extreme way, and often what I call the shadow expression, the less positive expression. So it is likely that there will be greater attempts on top-down power of control, etc., in some way. So if those happen, please understand this was anticipated by the astrology. It's very reassuring to see this in the astrology, and here we see it on the world stage, but actually this is what was expected from the astrology, because it's the end of the old world and the old systems, and I've talked about that in many ways over the last couple of years. However, because Pluto will then be moving direct, surging direct, it will feel different, because we are already anticipating that Aquarian energy that it's going to be moving into. Aquarius is much more to do with the people, equality, humanitarianism, horizontal social structures, not vertical. Pluto is the planet of power, so it will just begin to shift the power from top-down structures to the people. Again, we have to grasp those opportunities, but so much is already happening to build a very different world and a very different social structure as we speak. And you won't see that on the nightly news, of course.
I love that. You won't see that on the nightly news. She is so right. Okay, so for this next section here, what I need to do, because the video put together by Pam was about 48 minutes long, and there's a lot of really valuable information, and she goes into the actual chart itself and explains the chart. So again, I'll provide the link to that on the newsletter tomorrow, so everybody can access that and see it for themselves. But for the sake of brevity, we need to cut this down and still cover off the headlines. So here I am. I'm going to do my newscast a bit, and I have written down the headlines as we speak. So of the headlines, the reevaluating belief systems in light of new information was one of the things that Pam is talking about. Shining a light on and shedding social programming that is no longer useful or relates. She talked about Comet Atlas, which is visible in our skies between the 6th and the 16th of October. And it's interesting, actually, because like she talked about the solar activity, and I got to say that from where I am in England, we saw the Aurora Borealis this last Thursday night, pinks and greens and stuff all over the place. That doesn't happen down here, right? We normally have to go all the way up to Finland to see things like that. Things are changing. This is really as Pam puts it, this is information being shared. So, you know, that's it's amazing. I got pictures of a pink cloud in the middle of the night overhead. So that doesn't happen, does it? So the Comet Atlas between the 6th and the 16th of October often happens at times of great change, as well as new information being brought to humanity. The 17th of October sees the full supermoon in Aries. It's our third supermoon and the one closest to the Earth in 2024. Therefore, there will be more pulls on our tectonic plates. It brings more extreme weather, perhaps of a more fiery nature due to Mars's influence. Also, stronger pull on our psyches. We will feel this energy in the second half of October. So Pam goes on to explain through the charts, and she is really good. And I would encourage you, if you find yourself curious at the end of this, do check out her video. She says it signifies emotional intensity and focus around issues of power. Certain planetary alignments are running right into the US election in a very explosive way, which suggests brute force. Last time this alignment was this way was on the 7th of October 2023, and that was the date when Hamas attacked Israel. This specifically relates to the US chart, so this could not be more important. She does not seek to predict anything about the candidates for the election, as she does not want to add to the polarization. There's enough of that already. More twists and turns to come, as both candidates' charts are very highly activated. Pam doesn't know what is going to happen with the election, but she knows it will be something we are all going to notice. It's big, powerful, explosive, all about the power of the individual versus the power of the state. People will be very rebellious, revolutionary, agitated, wanting freedom, more human rights, more truth, a great deal of volatility and agitation in the astrology. Maybe events just before the election will derail the election and prevent it from happening. She asks with again, a possibility. If it does take place, it is likely that the result will be contested, with both candidates claiming victory. It's a very messy picture. This continues maybe even into January. The astrology brings questions over scandals and investment. And what is that going to do to the US dollar is the question. So, and this is emphasized elsewhere in the chart too, you know, bringing more truth to light. There are astrological alignments replicated that were there at the same time as the Wall Street crash. Financial market volatility often happens in October too. So watch around that. Pluto's influence in Capricorn has only until the 19th of November to play out. It is in its final degree when its influences are intensified. We will feel this intensity, the pressure, revelations around top-down structure, and that final degree, that 29th degree, the anaretic. It promotes urgency, a last gasp around that sign, particularly in its shadow expression. Sun in Libra could bring important legal developments for the world. They will become more public in this very full light because of the supermoon influence. Pam mentioned a very important legal case in New Zealand that could affect the world. But that was all she would say on it. So, you know, that one is left open. I have some ideas about what it could be around. But yeah, well, let's just leave that hanging out there. Now, here's a really important point to finish off this little section with here, and I need to expand further on this, but secrets are going to come to light in a much, much bigger way, which could involve things to do with toxicity, something criminal, or underhand. We could be rebuilding our belief systems as a result, the facts that are going to be coming to light at this time. This is all going to be about power, freedom, and truth. So, with that said, I have something that I need to put on here, which is going to mean I'm going to switch screens slightly from what I had on the Pam video, because this just came from the Greg Braden WhatsApp group, and gratitude to Claudia from the group for sharing this. And this is important. Just bear in mind what we've just said. Secrets coming to light to do with toxicity, something criminal or underhand, and end up rebuilding our belief systems. And you'll recall that last week we talked about the cymatics, which is about how water is influenced just through the sounds. It was talking about the cellular type of structure of water and how when it's imbued with love and joy and happiness, the crystals become absolutely pure and beautiful. And yet if it's subjected to things that distort it, it becomes ugly. In the same way that human cells, if you look at them when you're in a loving relationship, then those cells grow beautifully. And say if you look at a cancer cell and you see the distortion and the ugliness of that, well, that is what you've got to bear in mind as I play you this next piece. So bear with me.
What we're seeing here is the crystallography of healthy spring water. What you'll notice are these kind of flower-like hexagons that are forming. They're indicative of spring water. Here is another example of the same spring water that was collected on a different day, and you'll notice the same kind of patterns are forming. Now here we have the same spring water that you just saw that had sat next to a 5G cell tower for 15 minutes only. You can see how disordered it is structurally. In fact, in my opinion, it is completely destroyed.
Right, so that is an important thing, right? So that has just come forward literally this afternoon. And that is through Twitter. I'm going to put a link onto that again, onto the newsletter. Anybody that wants to get our newsletter who is not on our distribution list, just email me at johndrew@elevatedplanet.life with your email address, and I will make sure that you get on that list. So this, secrets are coming to light in a much, much bigger way. The point is that those 5G transmitters are on the side of water towers all over the place. So our water is effectively being made toxic. And I remember when we did a program with the Z's, Lee Harris and the Z's, going back a few months ago, and they made this very point. They said that there are elements of mankind who are totally aware of the toxicity that they are putting out to mankind, and yet there is a profit motive in actually suppressing it. These are the kind of things that come to light ahead of the new Earth. So, I think this is a major revelation, and this is just one of many that I believe is going to come to light. So with that said, I am going to invite, and just to offer gratitude there to Info Battle Maiden, who is the person who put that Twitter feed together that I've just lifted that from. So again, excuse me, there'll be a link on that tomorrow. So Jolie, can I bring you back in, please, just to quickly talk about that?
Yes, because as we spoke about, John, which is so fascinating, is I know that you see that and you're like, oh my gosh, but remember, you are just as powerful as that. So through meditation and consciously and I guess unconsciously, bringing in positive energy, working with your cells and your atoms, we can circumvent those things. Right. And it also works with our belief systems. So with enough of us, we've already seen it's interconnected. You see what's going on out in the world. So imagine if you were to spread positive energy.
Right.
I mean, imagine if you were to learn how to sit in joy, or see yourself at what I like to call the finish line of your bliss. Spend time there so that becomes further and further away from you, or you can fortify your electromagnetic field to repel those types of energetic, vampiric, type energies.
Yeah. Yeah, no, 100%. And I remember actually, because as you know, I'm a big Dolores Cannon fan for many years. And one of the things that she was told to do during her QHHT, quantum healing hypnosis technique sessions, she used to get entities coming through and actually giving her instructions on how to make herself healthier, actually stop her from eating certain foods. And certainly she was denied drinking Diet Coke and stuff like that, which was her favorite drink that she drank for years. But also they taught her to actually put energy into her food, to detoxify it. And how to do that was to imagine this anti-clockwise vortex in water she was going to drink, with a positive sort of like a clockwise vortex in the middle. And this was a way of actually purifying it. And the same way with the food as well, because food is just the same thing, just a slower vibrational state. So to imagine the same thing, and I know you have an angle on that yourself, Jolie, that you would employ.
Yes, I was taught in my clairvoyant training that a lot of people pray, but another way to do it is actively, which is to imagine or visualize gold light coming through your crown and out of your hands and onto your food. And that's a blessing and a cleaning of it. And part two of that, for those of you that are really wanting to clean it, is to ground your plate or your cup. Ground it into Mother Earth, drain it of all its negative energy, and fill it up with a golden sun. So these are ways to actively make sure some of your food stays vibrating with your frequency of health and well-being.
Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah, and I think that is really so important. I just think this is kind of like going to be the sort of thing that we're going to see a lot more of. You know, this 5G thing, I've been aware of, and we mentioned it early this year, that this was one of those points of toxicity that have been buried. You know, it's like many things. It's like in the 1960s, the doctors going on to advertise on television that cigarette smoking was good for you. This is a new version of that. It's the same kind of idea. So, you know, I think that this is the kind of thing that comes to light because it's got to come to the surface so that it can be rectified and released.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You tease the poison to the surface, right? So you can get rid of it.
Yeah, 100%. So one of the things that we're going to do now, and Jolie, you will be getting yourself ready now, because at the end of this next section, we go directly into the guided meditation visualization. And apologies, we've been slightly overrunning here, getting a little bit too excited. But yeah, so Pam is going to lead us into this, and she will be leading Jolie into the guided meditation. So prepare yourself, get ready, and here we go.
So it's very clear that we have some very dynamic, very eventful months to come. And, you know, I've said this many times, but please, please don't get caught up in the drama. Don't get scattered. I mean, obviously there's some extreme situations with weather, and then you have to deal with them as best you can. And I know, you know, some real horrors out there at the moment, and the rest of us can send peace and prayers, and also money donations if it helps as well. We can do that. But beyond that, if you aren't in those extreme situations, really do try and become masterful around where you put your focus, because there is a timeline, very obviously, of greater warmongering and extreme events on the Earth, but we quantum entangle with that when we go into fear. There's an entirely different timeline which is based on love, which is based on joy, compassion, gratitude, peace, and more people are coming together on that timeline, and you simply access it. Your key is to feel in one of those emotions. Your key is to feel in love. Your key is to feel in gratitude. Your key is to feel in peace. And then you access that higher timeline. And that higher timeline is growing very rapidly, because that's where the life force is going. That's where the astrological energy is going. So just know it's down to your choice of focus. Are you in fear? Are you in love? It's that simple. And I know we tend to be swept along by, you know, some awful events. So my advice would be, stay on your eagle's perch. Yes, you can be aware of what's happening in the world, but just try and stay in a more neutral place. Send help if you can, send prayers, send donations, but try and stay in a neutral place emotionally, because that will serve you and the entire collective much better. Because if we go into the ain't it awful, we're not helping ourselves, and we're not helping anybody on the ground. We are at our most helpful when we can stay in our center of strength and love to lift the consciousness of the collective, so we can stop some of these really hideous things happening in future. That's where we're headed. We're headed towards unity consciousness. It is happening quietly and powerfully. Just absolutely know that. And so I'd really encourage you to develop a very simple practice if you haven't already, even more so than you have already done. And whatever it is, it has to enable you within moments to drop into peace, to drop into bliss.
powerful. And, you know, it's just what we need right now. So thank you so much. And I know we've run well over our usual 1 hour target, but hopefully this is going to work for everybody, because these were some very important messages today. And one of them, obviously, to go back to the beginning, is that next week the live will be on Zoom directly rather than through YouTube. So if you are not on our distribution list already and you would like to get the link to that, just drop me an email to johndrew@elevatedplanet.life, and I will make sure that you are involved in everything we actually send out there. So fantastic. Next week, we're going to be looking at solutions to a chaotic world. So this is not just about, you know, painting a picture of the negative, as Pam herself would say, is that this is actually a time to get excited about a time where we are heading towards the age of Aquarius, which is all about, you know, peace. It's 1,000 years of peace heading our way. You know, it's a difficult thing to imagine with all the turmoil that goes on in the world. And we know there is going to be more conflict to come. But again, as Pam would say, get on your eagle's perch, allow yourself to you know, just go with that, and all will be well. So I think other than that, we have to realize we're far from powerless. We are, in fact, as Jolie put it herself, we are the masters, and we're moving towards unity consciousness. Now, I know, unfortunately, Jolie has dropped off the line. I know she's just been trying to get back in, but I will say goodbye on her behalf, because I think that we've kind of gone through everything we need to go through. I'm really grateful to Jolie for a fantastic meditation. And thank you also to our audience. And thank you to Child of the Light for her comments. As always, really, truly appreciate you, Sean the Shaman. Yeah, sending you much love. And also from Moira. So much gratitude. Thank you very much, Moira. Really appreciated. And as always, Anita, the High Priestess over in Italy, we're always so grateful to have you here with us, and for everybody else. Whether you're watching this live or whether you're watching this on the recording, if you like what we do, please give us one of those like thingies, and do come and join our Elevated Planet YouTube channel, because we're always, regardless of the fact we're going to put the live through Zoom, we're always going to be putting that content directly onto YouTube as well. Okay, I'm going to leave it at that. And another comment there from Anita, High Priestess. Wild and wise, yeah, and that's it. Actually, some content provided by Anita this morning actually really gave me an idea for where we're going next week. So thank you very much. That is very much appreciated. And so, yeah, that's it. Newsletter goes out tomorrow. johndrew@elevatedplanet.life. If you have any questions or thoughts that you wish to share, or you wish to join our distribution list. Other than that, I will say farewell, and and on behalf of Jolie and we will look forward to seeing you on Zoom next week, and don't hesitate to reach out with any questions. So love and light from us to you.